Welcome everyone, this is Fistful of Java, Lindell speaking. Starting the next video in a series of videos about the bands I was associated with. But to tell this story means I have to tell many different stories that converge in a place and time that changed everything I did musically from that point forward. So it's taken me a long time to start on this whole thing. I've gathered bits and pieces, but I want to tell it right because it's such a pivotal part of my life that I want to make sure all the details are right, and that those who weren't there or didn't live it will understand what I'm trying to say. To start off, let's talk about Eugene. You saw his picture there. Eugene was from New Orleans. He was the first person I ever met that had a musical resume. And I mean that was his only job that he's ever had. And he had a 3-page list of different projects he's worked on, different albums, different musicians. I mean, a regular resume except for music. The college he attended, it was impressive. I saw some names on there I didn't even recognize. But the idea that someone could make a living, such as it was, playing music was just, unheard of. So how I found Eugene was I answered an ad in the paper, Observer I believe it was, teaching lessons for $10 a lesson. And, I was at a point where I had been through all the books I had and was kind of stuck. So I thought finding an instructor was the best way to go, and it really was. The best way to describe it, have you ever seen the videos of animals that were raised in laboratories and then they're set free and they're taken out of the cage and they don't know how to behave? They see grass for the first time, they see the sun for the first time, they're just kind of dumbfounded. And that's kind of how I felt for a year as I'm learning all these new things, but it was freeing at the same time. Eugene got together with Gypsy, a guitar player from South Dallas, and his brother Ron, who I think was from Oak Cliff, and forming the core pieces that became Village, the house band for Chumley's. I was kind of a roadie student kind of thing, so I even did some roadie work for Gypsy on occasion. He had other gigs he went to, including someplace downtown I couldn't find again. My life depended on it. It was literally in the middle of a downtown behind one of the high-rises, and there was a little room on the back side. You had to know exactly where it is, and if you didn't know where it was one of those places you'd find on your own. And did a whole kind of a blues review thing on a Sunday evening. Most uncomfortable room I've ever been in. There was some really heavy black women up in there that looked at me like a steak on a plate. And I said, man, where have you brought me? I was not ready for that. There was about, 8 guys that rotated out and played blues all night. And so there was about 5 guitar players, and they all kind of took turns playing their thing. So what was Village? Village was a collection of artists, poets. We did skits, music, all kinds of weird collaborations. It was truly a village. Now, as far as band members were concerned, it was pretty much Eugene, Ron, and Gypsy. I was kind of an add-on piece into that. Usually I carried the equipment in, but I didn't get a chance to play with the group and also on some of the side projects, like Behind the Poets or different things, as a solo instrumentalist in most cases. So it was a bit of a circus. It started out with about 30 minutes of music that was planned, and from there it went wherever it went. If we're going to discuss the entire story, we got to talk about the guitar. Back in those days, I was playing what was called a Ibanez Blazer series. I bought it in a pawn shop for $125, didn't know anything about it. I picked it based on how it felt in my hands, and it felt the best of any guitar I'd ever picked up to that time. The size of the guitar was basically a Strat copy, Ibanez's version, but it was not a Strat configuration. It didn't have 3 single coils. It had 2 humbuckers and a phase shift switch on there, which I'd never heard of, never seen, but it gave a very unique sound, especially in the mid-range, that I thought was kind of cool. So $125 later, or plus tax, I'm out the door with the guitar. And so it was the guitar I used during that time, and when I had it, I felt like I could do anything. The feel of that guitar, the sounds I can get out of it, it was like it had just fallen from the sky into my hands, and it was exactly where it needed to be, all the way up until the time it was stolen. So I still, in some ways, mourn that guitar. So a few years ago, I guess it's been more than a few years now, it was about 6 or 7 years ago, I contacted Carbon and I had this made. I've shown you a picture of this guitar before, but basically this is my version of trying to recreate that guitar. The proportions are similar, not quite exactly the same. It has the phase switch on it. This one, however, is a neck through. As you can see, the neck goes all the way through. It's not bolted on. It also has coil switches, so I can switch it from single coil to humbucker. It also has locking tuners on there, which the previous one did not have. So it's also super pretty, way prettier than the one this is quote-unquote modeled after. However, I am not as attached to this one as I was the original, because the proportions of this one is a little bit different. It feels good, it just doesn't feel as good as that one did. This sounds really good on tape, sounds really good live. It does everything it's supposed to do and more. However, given an opportunity, I'd rather have my original guitar back. I'd give up this one in a heartbeat. I really would. So, that guitar made me feel like I could do anything. And maybe it was just the timing, maybe it's a romantic idea at this point, but I don't feel the same with this as I did with that original. Again, I think, timing has a lot to do with it. So, but I also was not aware of how good a guitar it was. I read recent reviews, like this week, on that same guitar that I had, or model similar to it, and the guy that reviewed it said it's the best Stratocaster under $1,000. He didn't say one of the best, he said the best, in his personal opinion. And in the world of instruments, that's all we got is our own personal opinion. But that's high praise. You know how many different versions of the Stratocaster run around out there? And for this cat to say this was the best one he'd ever picked up and played, that speaks volumes to me. And it reinforces what I already knew about the guitar, that it was, one of the best guitars I've ever owned. And I've owned some, name brands and all across the board as far as guitars are concerned. That was the one. That was that guitar that changed everything for me. To sum up, what's notable is that Village was one of the only black bands down in Deep Ellum at that particular time. There weren't very many black players down there. There wasn't very many black bands, one or two maybe, which is interesting considering the fact that, the blues in the black circuit was kind of what got the whole thing started down there at one point. So, notable also to me was the fact that I was taught to play bass as part of rounding out my guitar playing. by Eugene during that time. So I too now play both instruments, and I write with both instruments. During that learning time, I was also writing songs almost daily. Because once I got the buzz in my head, I was constantly writing, constantly had a guitar in my hands. So, but for all the fanfare, for all the production that went on into that group, it died the same as most of the rock and roll bands do. Everybody just kind of packed up and left. Even the owner of the club, Chumley, moved to New York. That space became a furniture store. And today the building is condemned. They say you can't go home again. And that's pretty much true in this case. Um, so, I thought when Chumley died, the Deep Ellum was going to go next. I thought, furniture store and Deep Ellum, that signals the end of an era. But if you check out my pictorial on Deep Ellum 2020, went back to visit some of the old haunts, and many of them are still there. Though Deep Ellum is not so much about music anymore as it is about eating and restaurants, but it's still alive and well. So, check out the Deep Ellum 2020 pictorial already up on my site. And as I said, like most bands, it's like the bag of tacos. Once all the tacos are gone, you throw the bag out and you move on. This is the Dolphin Fistful of Java. Until next time. Oh.